But there's one thing we can say for the last 50 years, Ed. The one thing that's been stable in this town, the one constant voice in play-by-play is this man right over here, HenryT.
Thank you.
That's one thing we can go constant. Am I right, Ed? For the last 50 years, the one thing we can say, we've got this guy, and what a gem you are, Henry. You really are.
Thank you. God bless you for that. I'm going to put that in my trophy case.
And and quite frankly, I've been lucky to meet. I remember Frank Joyce, and I remember I got to talk to Frank Joyce before he died. And of course, he was there when the Roswell incident. He was running his radio station in Roswell, and some guy called up. And he says there's a space crash out there, and he reported it on the radio. And then they finally, all of a sudden, he gets a call from the government or the Army or the Air Force. They told him to shut it down. You know what I mean? And he told me that story. Now, he never saw the spacecraft, but he reported it. And that's how he started it. I guess it was KLB had a station down in Roswell or something like that, affiliate. And then he came up to New Mexico, and he became the voice of the Lobos after Connie Alexander left. Henry, welcome to America Talk It Up, and this is going to be our final episode as a show, but you're still going to be a guest in the future. Henry's trying to build his show, and by the way, HenryT Game Face is really doing well.
Thank you. And it's been an honor and a sincere, fun experience to be with you, but his intellect is far greater than mine. He needs somebody that's sharp, witty, and can keep up with his wit. And the storytelling ability of my buddy Marty Watts is incomparable. So it's been a pleasure kind of sitting with you as you got your great show off the ground. Yeah, but you're raising it so high, it's time for me to fly away in this direction and let you really build. Well,
you know, we've done quite well. We're close to 30,000 views on Facebook, and and a few thousand on YouTube. We're trying to build up the YouTube. And if you're watching this podcast, go up to YouTube and hit subscriber, or if you're watching it on Facebook, go up and hit the follow button and hit the like button. And we're building this up, and we've got some great stuff down the line. And I wouldn't be here without you, Henry. I mean, you're the reason why I'm here, and we're both Sandia Matadors, Ashababa Ole, that's for sure. And I'm telling you right now, I think the one thing about our podcast, and we have a combination of sports stories, history, a little bit of everything. I didn't want to be pigeonholed just being a sports show. Now, I can understand your thing is doing great interviews with people.
Thank you.
Sports and everything. And that's what you got to watch HenryT Game Face live.
And for the same reasons, that's why you got to watch America Talk It Up with Marty Watts. And I've grown as a broadcaster working with you. And in fact, I've lost it a couple of times because he's so funny and his stories are remarkable. I lose track of why I'm on this air, because his stories are so incredible. So that's your forte.
Well,
I might interview, okay, your storyteller is the best I've ever heard.
Well, thank you. I never wanted to be I never saw myself as a play-by-play guy or even color. There's been times when ProView Networks asked me to be a color guy for a football game, but I just never felt comfortable, because to be a good color guy, you really got to know the offense, defense, the players, and that was my thing, was telling stories, like you said, talking about other athletes. What you master is the great interview. I'm just more of a storyteller, telling about what happened in the past, more history, and that's my lane. As you said, that's my lane.
Yeah, and I love doing the play-by-play, and I might dodge his bullet. I think I'm a better play-by-play guy than a interviewer. So I appreciate the compliment.
Well, you are a great play-by-play. When I was for the last 40 years, people, if they say one thing about HenryT, the first thing they would say, he's the guy that brought high school sports on the radio, play-by-play, plus you did college, the Lobos. So people, if you ask the average guy, they probably would think of you the great play-by-play person.
Thank you. And gosh, now I'm really at the mountaintop. Thank you, Marty.
You think of the great play-by-play people in New Mexico, you would have to go with Mike Roberts, Frank Joyce, Connie Alexander.
Wow.
Those are all. Connie Alexander was a national broadcaster. You're in with all those guys, and
Thank you.
And I would say most people have listened to you more than I think Mike Roberts, because you did so many games for prep games, and you're always all those great state basketball tournaments you did. Your voice was just. I mean, you can't forget it.
Thank you. And I've had the honor of broadcasting Marty's games back in the day, and that was a pleasure because he was indescribable. Well, you don't like me to go there. I know he hates these compliments, but you were an athlete.
Well, I was a pretty good player. I mean, there was a lot better players than I was, but I'm glad you got to see me play. I mean, at least most guys remember me going into the locker room doing a prayer session for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Now
that was good.
Now they do it on the 50-yard line, but yeah, you become a legend in your own mind as the years go down. But I will tell you this. There's nothing better playing in sports. It teaches you a lot of things, Henry. It teaches you teamwork. It teaches you setting goals. It teaches you that you never give up. And to be a true champion, are you willing to do things that nobody wants to do?
Yeah.
That's my definition of champion. Are you willing to pay the price to get there? Most people who complain in life, they wonder why they're not living this lifestyle, or if they really want that lifestyle, or they're not happy. Did they pay the price to get there? Most people don't want to do that. Most people will do enough to keep their boss off their backs. I'm not going to criticize that, but if you want to be a champion, are you willing to do things that nobody wants to do? That's my definition of champion.
That's pretty accurate. That's extremely so.
And to be a great broadcaster like you had to pay the price. You had to learn the craft. You had to go through the bumps on the way to the top. Nobody becomes a great broadcaster in the beginning. They learn. But you pay the price to get there. And very few people do that.
Well, we're going to be parting ways here today because I really want to build up the sports side of my talents right now and leave this show, which has got some sports in it, but Marty's far more versatile than me. So we'll leave the new versatility to Marty, and he'll have an exciting guest that's going to sit in this chair from now on, and you'll love him, that's for sure. But it's time for HenryT to just concentrate on the HenryT show. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, and folks, go up to HenryT Game Face Live, and he's on Facebook, and go up there, and God, some of the greatest interviews in the last 2 or 3 months. I've been able to witness some of these interviews, and you talking about knowing your stuff, and those interviews are fantastic.
Thank you, Coach.
But anyway, with that saying, with the whole idea of this life, Henry, when it really comes down to it, can you spread some love and sunshine and enthusiasm?
I think that's your forte. Friendly to everybody. You hug everybody. I think you're running for governor or something. Because everybody's your buddy. And the warmth that they come and give you is really a reflection of who you are to them. You're everybody's friend. Well,
there's a guy in the Bible called Barnabas, and if you're a study of the Bible, or he was the guy that went out with Paul to preach to the Gentiles, and he got stuck in this place called Antioch. And Paul was self-doubting at that time. He didn't know if he wanted to go out and preach the gospel to the Gentiles. He left Israel, Jerusalem, and he's sitting there, and there's this guy named Barnabas who's saying, Paul, you can do it. You can make it happen. I'm here to make you get there. That's me. I'm Barnabas. I'm the encourager. I'm the guy that wants to spread sunshine and love.
Yeah, you do.
And remember, the best gift you can give to anybody is laughter and love and of course, the Lord in your life. But all these things are a factor. And I'm telling you, people, don't take yourself too serious. You enjoy each day you have. And there's no guarantee you're going to be here tomorrow. I hope I'm going to be here tomorrow, but what if this was our last day on earth, Henry? Why not make the best of what we have?
Make a difference.
Yeah, and every contact is important. You never know. And I never close the door behind me. I might disagree with certain people, but I still love them. Yeah. I don't dislike anybody. I don't hate anybody. I might disagree politically with somebody, but I don't dislike. Now, I've had a couple people who cut me out of their life because I support another candidate, but I think that's kind of a little, because they're still my friend. We're still going to be friends. Henry, even if you and I disagree, we're going to be friends for the rest of our lives.
Forever.
And
the moment we met, we were friends.
Right.
And we'll take it the distance in friendship.
And remember, when he got in that game as quarterback, the quarterback got injured in the San Diego game. I was there in the stands, and all of a sudden, little Henry DeFoya comes on the field, and the very first series, he throws a touchdown pass. Now, what a great opening for a quarterback. How many quarterbacks throw a touchdown pass?
Well, that's unforgettable. And if it's okay, I tell that story every day of my life.
Yeah. Now, was it a 30-yard pass or was it 50 or 60 yards? I don't know.
It was about 50. We're at midfield.
Yeah, and it was at Wilson Stadium.
And, by the way, it was a beautiful spiral.
Right. I remember. But if I knew that was going to be the great HenryT, here it is, 50-some years later, and you and I are doing a podcast together.
Is that amazing?
Did anybody ever thought that would happen?
Wow. That's why I'm honored to be here. And, this is the Mutual Admiration Society going on right here. But you have to know about the peaceful closing down of this show with Marty and I. And he means it, and I do too. Friends forever. Respect forever. But I'm going to move over here and concentrate on the HenryT sports side, and Marty's going to take this show to the mountaintop. And I'll be watching and listening to these incredible stories that you pass on to all of our viewers. Where do you get those stories? And the ability is innate. It had to come right out of heaven.
Well, I always loved history, as you know, and when I was a kid in school, history was the best class I ever.
Yeah.
I performed, but I read a lot of books. My mother worked at a bookstore back when I was a little boy, before she got in the wig business and hair salon business, and she was bringing me books all the time, and it was great when your mother worked at a bookstore. You got some benefits.
Wow.
And I started reading, and then my mother. I think one of the greatest things I ever got in my life was a library card. My mother got me to the library.
How about that?
Now, I have a learning disability. I'm dyslexic, they call it. So I'm a slow reader. So it takes me longer to read a book than most people. But I enjoy reading. I enjoy histories. I love novels. I love historical novels. And in some way, I kind of like the... And then I've been around history, I've met 3 different presidents. I met Richard Nixon. I met Ronald Reagan. I met Ford, President Ford, Gerald Ford. I met him as a congressman. So I've had an opportunity. I met Bush. I went to a dinner with Bush once. Bush #1. So I've been lucky to meet some people in life, and so the older you get, you got more stories, more memories. I think of Ronald Reagan. I met Ronald Reagan in Lake Tahoe at a Harris casino. I was at a Young Republican convention, and I was the chairman of New Mexico, and I got invited by the guy from California, Republican, to have breakfast with Ronald Reagan.
Gee.
And he was that time he was governor of California, and I knew who he was, but I didn't know. So I got up in the morning, and I got there, and there was him and I and this guy from California, and we had breakfast together. And all I remember, I look back, somebody asked me, what did he say? And all I remember, he told some Irish joke. You know, he loved to tell Irish jokes, stories. And I remember we just laughed the whole time while we were having breakfast. And that was my one and only time I ever met Ronald Reagan. But it was pretty fun, and you could tell he had a sense of humor. And that's one thing that I love in politicians, if you can have a sense of humor. And he did. He could talk about a storyteller. Ronald Reagan could tell a story.
And I'll bet you captured his undivided attention with your stories.
Well, the only thing I remember, we're going to wrap this up, when I told him my name was Martin Luther Watts Jr., he started chuckling. He said, Martin Luther. I said, yep.
Nobody has that name anymore.
So maybe he remembers me for that, but that was my moment with Ronald Reagan. Hey, folks, we're gonna leave and get back to the next segment, and we're gonna bring our friend Ed Nunez here, who's gonna be part of the show in the future. And so we've got a couple more segments left. But hey, Henry, what a great beginning with you and I.
Amen.
And boy, you've helped us get to all these episodes, and we're up over 30,000 viewers now.
Wow.
So what a great run.
Gee.
That's all I can say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back to segment 2, and I've got Henry for my last show that we're doing officially together.
Man, this is emotional.
Yeah, and we've got as our other co-host Ed Nunez, who is a play-by-play for ProView Network. He's the voice of Western New Mexico football, volleyball, and basketball. And I've known Ed ever since I've been involved with ProView the last 5 years. And of course, Ed Nunez is a former Highland High School legend.
And I used to broadcast his games.
Yeah, and he was a referee for 22 years. He's done a lot, and he worked for the city of Albuquerque for a long time. He just retired. And Ed, tell us your experience. You started out working with Henry back in the old days.
Well, in 2009 when I was officiating, I had a knee that was real balking. I couldn't officiate that season. And it was depressing because I couldn't, I was used to being at games. And I remember, Henry and I knew each other for a long time. Henry would see me at games, and after the game he'd say, hey, you're a good official. He remembered me from the Boys Club. I used to be at the Old Town Boys Club, and Henry would remember that. And I remember, I think I just called him. I said, Henry, can I do a game with you? And we did a game on Zano, and I believe it was Volcano Vista. That was my debut as his color guy. And it went really well. I remember Henry called the next day, and my mom was so excited. My mom was so excited. She was listening with my nephew David, who played for El Dorado around that time. And my mom was so excited. She passed away in 2016, but she was excited because she was telling my nephew, "There's no way that's not Edward." That's what she would call me. He sounds too professional. It's kind of funny. But that was the debut that I made. That I had with you in that season. I couldn't ref, and so doing those games with you, we got to be so close because I learned a lot. I had to learn Henry's way of broadcasting. I'm just breaking into business, right? So if I came in when I wasn't supposed to, bam, karate chop right to my leg, right? So he taught me a lot is when to come in and when not to. I had to be patient. There was a lot of things I had to learn. I'm still learning. You know,
it's incredible. I started listening to Ed the last 4 years, and when I first listened to Ed, I thought I was listening to another HenryT, because you get excited like Henry. The way you raise your voice on certain plays and stuff, it was more like HenryT, And I saw a little bit of HenryT in your broadcast. You could tell you learned from the master here.
Well, it's not an accident. I think during the times when there was a three-point play, boom, boom, that was vintage HenryT, boom, right? The dipsy-do move. There were so many things, but one thing he told me, one thing that he reminded me of, you have to have your own style. So I had to have my own catchphrases, my own way of exhibiting excitement. Now, one of the things I did learn this year, when I went to Western, and I listened to some voices in the Lone Star Conference, I said to myself, I need to get better. I need to keep improving, because the voices in the Lone Star Conference were very good. I'm a competitor, right? So I had to learn and get better. Describe the games in a different way, right? To continue to, this is the college level. And so I wanted to be as good as I could. One of the things I had to understand, too, was the voice meter on the board, not to keep making it go up because my voice is strong. I did get excited, but I learned to control it. I had to learn Jason Pohl, the producer of ProView.
Right.
Would tell me, Ed, you're doing, because there's times I'm in the red. If I'm in the red, keep it down. So I've learned how to control my voice as an announcer. There's things that you have to learn, right? Now, Henry, you would tell me this too, that there was a lot of people that wanted to broadcast with you, right? You would tell me that. So not everybody can do it. Everybody thinks they can, but it takes a while. I'm still learning that craft. You did it. Whenever you mention my name with a great legend, he did 400,000 games. I've done 500 maybe, and I've done more than that. But Henry has done it for. He did YFL. He covered Little League. He covered the Lobos. He covered high school. He covered everything there. Boxing. He was a ring announcer. There was things that he's done. He covered the Indy 500, the Dallas Cowboys at training camp. There's things that I can only. He interviewed Muhammad Ali in a vintage epic interview. So there's no things that I know for me, I'll never reach those peaks. It's okay though, right?
Never say never.
Well, that doesn't mean I'm not trying to improve, that I love what I do, right? You and I talk still. We're still very close friends.
Well, the interesting thing you said, you're trying to improve, get better. You know what? You never lose that, ladies and gentlemen. You're always trying to get better. So I hope by the time I'm done with this, I'll never use that phrase that I've learned it all, that I can't improve. You can improve every time you get behind this thing. And that's the position I want to take. It's one of those subject matter that there's just so much to learn. There are no parameters in communication.
Yeah, there's I got to tell you, how I made my debut as a play-by-play announcer was I was the color guy. I had never done play-by-play. And we're in the third quarter of a game at the pit.
Right.
And I still remember this. Henry says, and now making his debut as the play-by-play announcer, Ed Nunez. My eyes must have bugged out of my head because I wasn't ready for that. I was not ready. But I'll tell you one thing: if you hadn't done that, I never would have been a play-by-play guy.
You were ready.
No, I didn't. It's funny. Maybe you thought I was, and you were right. But at that time, I was a little bit nervous about it. And so, but if you hadn't done that, I may have never become a play-by-play guy. If you had never done that.
In this town, we've had a history of some great play-by-play people. You go back to Frank Joyce. Probably one of the greatest is Connie Alexander. Of course, you got Mike Roberts. And then you got you and Henry, and there's some other guys we can talk about.
And don't forget the great Gene Osborne.
Yeah, Gene Osborne.
Gene Osborne was real good.
He was really good. So we've been lucky that we brought, these guys, you guys have come along. But you know what? I will tell you this, Ed. When I first started listening to you, your voice got high on some big plays. But I noticed since you've been doing the Western New Mexico games, your broadcast has just gotten better and better. And that's the whole thing. You're always thriving to be the best. Every time out. You know
what? You mentioned Henry mentioned Gene Osborne. I remember as Dan Smith, at Channel 13. He didn't do play-by-play. Scott Garceau. The guys that were Channel 13. You also were on Channel 4, Channel 13, Channel 7 as a sports anchor. Besides doing play-by-play. So those guys at the stations were awesome guys that did the Bob Brown, Channel 7. There's so many guys we can mention, but you mentioned play-by-play guys that do it. Sebastian Noel's very good. Adam Deal's very good. Scott Galletti. There's a lot of guys, and it's work. And I think people forget that you have to have your own style and your own way you do it, and it's not easy. It's not. But one of the things that helped me at Western was the SID, the Sports Information Director, gave me all the stats and information that I needed to make it a better broadcast. Scott Galletti kind of mentioned that to me too. If you're going to do it on the college level, you better be ready and be prepared as far as getting information out. It's a different level, and he wasn't wrong.
Well, and I've got to thank Steve Davis for ProView Networks. He's given a lot of people opportunity to do play-by-play. Thank God Steve, has ProView Networks. And, of course, there's other guys in the radio business and TV business. Of course, you started out with Channel 7, KOA TV, right, Henry?
Yes, as a matter of fact. And then Dick Niffin and I went around the horn. The contracts change, opportunities change. But, yeah, and if there would have been two other stations in town, I would have tried them out too.
Yeah, you probably would have. But there's one thing we can say for the last 50 years, Ed. The one thing that's been stable in this town, the one constant voice, in play-by-play is this man right over here, HenryT.
Thank you.
That's one thing we can go constantly. Am I right, Ed? For the last 50 years, the one thing we can say, we've got this guy, and what a gem you are, Henry. You really are.
Thank you. God bless you for that. I'm going to put that in my trophy case.
And quite frankly, I've been lucky to meet. I remember Frank Joyce, and I remember I got to talk to Frank Joyce before he died. And of course, he was there when the Roswell incident. He was running his radio station in Roswell, and some guy called up. He says there's a space crash out there, and he reported it on the radio. And then they finally, all of a sudden, he gets a call from the government or the Army or the Air Force. They told him to shut it down. You know what I mean? And he told me that story. Now, he never saw the spacecraft, but he reported it. And that's how he started it. I guess it was KLB had a station down in Roswell or something like that, affiliate. And then he came up to New Mexico, and he became the voice of the Lobos after Connie Alexander left. And Connie went on to bigger and better things. You know.
Can you imagine what Frank Joyce realized and what he did?
Yeah.
A flying saucer just crashed in Roswell. Ladies and gentlemen, bulletin. And here he comes.
And he put it on the air, and it went all over the world, his little thing, Frank Joyce. And when I first moved here to Albuquerque around 60, he was the voice of the Lobos, and I listened to him. And I was really disappointed when he left and Mike Roberts, because I didn't know who Mike Roberts was. He was the guy from Farmington, New Mexico. He was doing those games. Then Mike became a legend. You know, Mike went, 47 years on the air?
Wow. Well, we all learned from Mike.
Yeah,
we all learned from each other. Let's put it that way.
And, you know, I would be in California, Ed. I'm on the beach. I'm living in San Diego, and I'm sitting there on the beach about 6 o'clock at night, Saturday night. The waves are coming in. It's a beautiful sunset in Southern California. I take my transistor, and I'm hearing the voice, the Lobo game on the beach, because at 50,000 watts, KLB got out to California. And I'm listening to the game, and I'm in heaven. I'm sitting there. I'm listening to the Lobos at Del Mar Beach, and they're in San Diego. So it's a great, I remember those great broadcasts from Mike.
And he was wonderful.
So, Ed, tell me about your experience being your first year with Western New Mexico, because he had to go down and establish a new broadcast program for Western New Mexico. And if you don't know where Western is, it's in Silver City, New Mexico. Describe that place for us.
Well, you know, I want to talk about the athletic director out there first, is Scott Noble. Scott Noble's a great guy, and I really enjoyed going down there. Steve Davis got the deal going with Scott Noble, and we started out in September doing football and volleyball. So I got to know the football coach, Frank Tristan, the head coach, volleyball coach, Holly Watts, basketball coach. They've got a new one now, and also the women's basketball coach. They've got two new coaches on both sides there. But one of the things was we started a segment called Mustang Minutes. So we'd have a coach on or a player on, and the segment's called Mustang Minutes. That was Tom Dragmeister's idea.
Right.
You know, and it worked out great. So I got to know all the coaches with those segments. We had players on, and I'll tell you, I got to be really familiar with the landscape in Silver City because we traveled down there. We just did home games. And, Coach, you know how the road is, man. The road can beat you up. And it did beat me up. It did beat me up a little bit. You know, it ended in March, and, you know, it's a lot of travel. It's a lot of travel.
Is it 3 hours?
3.5, 4 hours. 3.5, 4 hours.
Unless you go through the Black Range Mountains.
Right.
And you're not going on the way back. You're not going on, you know, through the mountains. There's no way. So we go through Deming, and I'll tell you one thing. It was funny because, you know, I work with some of the young guys at ProView.
Right.
And they want to go, like, home as soon as the game is over on a Saturday night. Boom. They want to hit the road. And me, being an older guy, I'm like, I'm not sure about those one-lane highways at night, you know. So, but, you know, Josh Brown, who did a great job down there, Alden Iowani, Jason Pohl, they all went down with me. Josh Brown more than anyone else. But we really had a great time down there, Marty. Right now we're not sure about where Western's at as far as college or any athletics, but I'm looking forward to being a voice again for the Western New Mexico athletics out there.
Silver City's up in the Gila Wilderness area. It's beautiful. It's right there close to the Arizona border, the White Mountains. It's a beautiful area, great trout fishing. It's if you've never been in that part of the country, you're missing something. Am I right?
When I first drove there to Silver City, and Coach, I had never been there. That's one place I had never been, and I didn't know what to expect. And when I saw it, I was like pleasantly surprised. It's a beautiful city. It's a small city. It's quaint. It's old. You can walk down Main Street, and they've got these doors from like the 1880s. These houses from long ago with history markers. I love history.
Yeah.
I think you and I are going to have some good history talks.
Yeah.
And it's a very quaint little town, and I really enjoyed it. I really.
And,
did.
It's funny. Billy the Kid actually lived there at one time. Billy the Kid came out of Silver City. Famous Billy the Kid.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Pat Garrett. Yeah, and that's going to be in a future segment. We're going to do a story on Billy the Kid, Rocky Aragon. And Ed was there that day we did that show.
I was really impressed with Rocky. I really was. He knows, Coach, you wouldn't believe what he knows about Billy the Kid, man. He amazed me. We've seen the movies. I've read a few books, but what he knows, wow.
And
yeah.
boy, when that show comes on, it's going to be after this show. We're going to be talking about Anate. And people don't know the real story about Anate. And when you hear this segment, you're going to come up with a different perspective who Anate was. Am I right, Ed?
When he talked about Oñate, I'll tell you, I didn't know anything about it, but when he told the story, it made me think I was there. When those things happened with the Zuni Indians.
Right.
I had no idea, but he brought the whole new perspective about Oñate in my mind. He really did.
And I think if we can get that story out to people, people are not going to be dragging this guy down like they're doing right now. I think he's getting unjust. They're coming after him for a lot of things, and I don't think that was 300 or 400 years ago we're talking about.
No, that's true.
And it was a different time, but that's going to be on another segment. But hey, how much we got left, Jimmy, on this one? About a minute. I just want to say it's a pleasure having you been with me for all these segments. I've got Ed coming on. Ed's going to be part of this show, and we've got a lot of story. The one thing I can say about Ed Nunez, he loves history. This guy reads books. He loves stories. I mean, it's amazing some of the things Ed.
Well, I told you I'm reading that book, 1945, about the atomic bomb, and it's amazing. I'm dragging it out, so I could have read that in 2 days.
Great story.
But no, you wouldn't believe I'm at the point there where it's almost ready to launch the bomb. And all the things they had to do to get it ready, they're not sure if it's going to work or destroy the world. It's just an incredible book, and I'm trying to space it out because I don't want it to end. I'm having a real good time reading it.
What I'm thinking about, Ed, is that we'll get together and we'll pick out some books that are coming out, history books that we want to read. You'll read one, and we do like a little book report. We can discuss the book, I think that would be great, and there's some great books I like to read. There's some things on the Civil War I'm into. Of course, I love the Battle of Gettysburg. I could talk about that all day, and Robert E. Lee, and talk about I really think our Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, he's finally getting some just notice as a great general.
Well, my opinion of the Battle of Gettysburg is, why did Robert E. Lee attack a fortified Union center? And they kept telling him, don't Pete Longstreet. James Longstreet is one of his generals. Why are you attacking there? That you wouldn't really listen. So I thought that was a mistake on General Lee, and the South never came that far again. So,
ladies and gentlemen, these guys take a very serious approach to broadcasting. I'm going to stay over here in a more comfortable setting where there are no parameters for HenryT, and I just want to be a sports guy. These guys are going for the history books. I love history too, but I'm going to step aside. And I wish them the very best. I love you both like brothers, and hey, go get them. Go get them, buddy. I've known them both all my life, and I wish them both well.
And
I'll see you later.
And it's a good way to end this, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We got sports history. We got a lot of things we can talk about, and we'll talk about Gettysburg because I've got some theories on that. But listen, folks, we're going to end this segment. And Henry, it's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. And as my father thanks you, my mother thanks you, my sister thanks you, and myself, without anything, I love you, Henry. And thank you for being part of the show.
And he was a great running back. He doesn't like me saying that, but man, this guy could fly, stop on a dime, accelerate, and get up the sideline, and there's Marty Watts waving the ball in the end zone. Matadors.
Well,
yes.
So how we go? Asha Baba,
Ole.
Ole.